All right, guys, welcome back to class. I know this is a little bit new for everybody. It's new for me, but definitely want to continue to have a sense of normalcy to it, to what we do, which is PowerPoints and just me lecturing through things and kind of getting y'all where y'all need to get to. And I'm trying to make sure that this is set up more like a college course in a sense that really you're only going to have a lot of my lectures on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, and your assignments won't be due until Friday. You'll have office hours if you want to meet with me on Tuesdays and Thursdays, as you saw in the emails. So it's new, it's different, but I got no doubt that we're all going to do just fine. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So as we move into World War II, the first things we want to talk about is kind of how we get to that point. Plenty of you guys have probably seen plenty of movies on World War II, but very little is actually talked about on how we get there, and really almost how naive the Allies were at the early stages of this war. So in this time, in the early 20s, early 30s, this is when we start to see this rise of totalitarianism. And we won't talk too much about everybody, but I do want to kind of brief you on a few things. So in 1999, Joseph Stalin takes over control of the Soviet Union. Stalin is actually the Russian word for man of steel, and many considered him to be that. A lot of people give Hitler so much grief for the killing of 6 million Jews and gypsies and homosexuals and communists and things like that. But Stalin was even more ruthless. He actually killed over 10 million of his own people. So not a cool guy to have over for a cup of tea. Benito Mussolini for Italy was kind of what Hitler was to Germany. He tried to escape military service but eventually had to get back in, had to get into it. There's no way of avoiding it, and he was a great public speaker, energetic, boisterous, and saw his dreams of being. What he wanted to do was bring Italy back to the days of the Roman Empire, and he kind of goes on his little quest to do that. The downfall is, and we'll talk about that in a second, his military sucks. They're not very good. Francisco Franco, who takes over power in Spain during the revolution in 1936 to 1939, he is actually helped by Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. They see it as an opportunity to get their forces into a test and kind of experiment and try out all this new equipment that they've produced. And so you have fascists that show up in Spain. And then, of course, as we all know, Adolf Hitler will take power in Germany in 1934. So let's talk about the rise of the Nazi Party. So the Great Depression, coupled with the reparations that Germany had to pay after if you would call it a defeat, it was more like a stalemate, a tie in some ways, of World War I, caused major economic issues. To give you an idea, Germany alone was forced to pay about 6.6 billion pounds, British pounds, to England and France. To give you an idea of how that translates to our money today with inflation, that's about 393.6 billion US dollars. So yeah, that's a lot of money. And of course, Germany didn't really have it. These anti-democratic parties on the right, especially the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, threatened the Republic. They felt like the Republic and the democracies of old weren't doing their job. They weren't representing the people well. And so this was kind of their moment to rise and shine. Despite the name socialist in the actual name, Nazis actually hated socialism and communism. They were more about German ethnic solidarity, and they hated anything that would put that would threaten that. So with that, we want to talk about Adolf Hitler. Now, Adolf Hitler, he was born in Austria. He fought well in World War One. In fact, he was awarded the Iron Cross, second class, for bravery in the Battle of Ypres. I'm guessing that's how you're going to pronounce it. We do know it's in Belgium. 4 years after the battle, he's awarded the Iron Cross, first class, for his role as a messenger, running through the battle and transporting messages to and from different points of their line while he's being shot at. And I do believe he was wounded. But he's almost like, it's almost like winning the Silver Star or even the Medal of Honor. So he was a pretty good soldier. And funny enough, his commanding officer who puts him up for these awards was a Jew. Hitler comes home. He comes back to Munich, and he wants to be an artist actually. And he's trying to do all his paintings and things in order to get into art school, and the art school rejects him, and they say he's not good enough. And then we kind of start to see where the mind of Hitler is. He doesn't say, "Oh, dang, my bad. I guess I'll just have to do better next time." He actually blames the art school. He says they are too stupid to understand I'm so talented. Like he does not even contemplate that he could have done something wrong. He sits there and he blames the art school for not recognizing his talent. So a bit of arrogance, maybe even narcissism there. And one night he actually stumbles into a meeting of the National Socialist Party. I think he actually went as a spy, but was won over by what they were talking about. And he ends up working his way into the system, becomes a leader of the party, tries to go for a government coup. He's put in prison, and after it fails, and he writes a book now called Mein Kampf, which was my struggle, and in that he kind of blames Germany's problems on a bunch of things. He blames it on the communists, the socialists, the Jews, different ideologies, everything. And it became a national bestseller. Now, the big thing that got Hitler so popular when he got out of prison was he was so I'm trying to think of the word for it. He was so passionate. That's what it was. He was so passionate when he spoke. If you guys have ever watched a video of him speaking, and he's he's just saying all the stuff he's saying, but his arms are flapping, he's beating his chest, and he's screaming in the air, and that is what really got people's attention when he would be out in public. And that is also kind of when they're listening to him and he starts coming up with solutions, that's what gives him even more support. So the passion that he shows is the number one thing that gets everybody's attention. But then what he's saying is, this is how I'm going to bring Nazi Germany, or this is how I'm going to bring Germany out of this depression. And so with this, the Nazi Party starts to grow, and within a few months, they're the dominant party. And so the president actually puts him in as chancellor, which is almost like second in command of the country. And within a month of him being in control, the Reichstag, or the German parliament, burns down. Hitler blames the communists, called on emergency powers to be given to him. He uses this new power to ban all the other political parties, and boom. Now he's got even more power than pretty much the president. When the president does die in 1934, he names himself the absolute leader. Now, Hitler goes on to help the country grow. His economic policies, massive public works, almost like a little FDR, except meaner. He's also secretly building up this massive military. The Versailles Treaty basically said that Germany can't have 100,000 soldiers. That is nothing. If anybody wanted to come in and fight Germany, they could have done it, and they could have wiped them off the map. So 100,000 soldiers. Can't have more than 100,000 soldiers. You can't have an air force. You can't have tanks. You can't even have submarines. You really have no method of waging war or even defending yourself. Hitler says, you know what, the heck with that. We're going to do it anyway. So he does it in secret. But then in 1935, he actually reveals his hand. He shows off this new air force. It's called the Luftwaffe, and that's German for the air weapon. And this is their Luftwaffe is composed of about 2,500 planes. And he had also increased the army to about 300,000. Now, just alone, the 2,500 planes was way more than what Britain and France had. And you, if you watch if you watch different documentaries and videos on World War II, you'll see that even Italy had built up their navy in the Mediterranean to where they actually rivaled or even were even bigger than the French and British Mediterranean fleets. So the Allies were getting kind of nervous about this. So in the same year of 1935, Hitler claims the Saarland. That's kind of this little bold, this little dark green area that's kind of highlighted on this slide right here, and the Saarland had voted to get out of the League of Nations and join Germany. Hitler has no problem with taking it, and he does. In 1935, Mussolini sees his opportunity to start growing his empire, but most of the areas around Africa and the Middle East and things like that are already occupied by the British and French. He doesn't want to go to war with them. He needs to find somebody easy to fight, and he finds Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia is in the League of Nations, and when Ethiopia realizes they're about to be attacked, they actually ask the League of Nations. They're like, hey, help us out. The League of Nations does nothing. And so it kind of shows off how weak the League of Nations was. Nobody wanted to try to step in and stop these guys because they were afraid of an all-out conflict, an all-out war. In 1936, Hitler sends troops into the Rhineland, which is highlighted right there on your map. This area had been demilitarized, and he sends all his troops in there anyway. He basically just tears up the Versailles Treaty right there. Neither Britain or France rejected. They're like, okay, hey, cool, no problem, man. And you'll see that they really kind of take this idea of appeasement literally. In 1931, a little bit earlier than all this, because I'm trying to keep everybody, all these things are happening at the same time, guys, and so I'm trying to make sure that we don't forget anybody. But Japan invades Manchuria in 1931, and this actually shows off a blatant example of how powerless the League of Nations actually was, because they condemned Japan for it, and Japan basically walks up in the front of the League of Nations and says, yeah, we don't care, and then just walks out, and there was nothing the League of Nations could do about it. So also in 1937, after conquering the Chinese capital of Nanking, the Japanese forces kind of run amok, and this is where we start to see their brutality. And what's known as the Rape of Nanking, the Japanese butcher about 150,000 male prisoners. They massacre an additional 50,000 male civilians, raped at least 20,000 women. However, some figures even show numbers as high as 300,000 killed. I mean, just straight up out of nowhere, just remorseless killings. The Japanese Navy also took this opportunity to attack British and U.S. ships. They really weren't going to war. Britain and the United States didn't really care to go to war with Japan. They were just trying to protect their economic shipping interests. And Japan attacked them, and one of the incidences was the sinking of a U.S. ship named the Panay, and it resulted in the death of 50 U.S. sailors. Still, the Western powers refused to get involved. They didn't want nothing to do with it. They didn't want to get into a war. They wanted to try to stay away from war as much as possible. Even the Soviet Union refused to get involved when the Japanese were threatening their area. And with that, guys, I'll tell you what. Let's get through this last slide here, and then we'll pick up the rest later. So, France and Britain choose a policy of appeasement, and basically what they're trying to do is they just say, okay, look, as long as we keep giving him what he wants, eventually he'll stop, and we'll just maintain peace throughout. And there was a few reasons why, and you'll want to know those. So number one was that World War I was so horrible, no one wanted to get back into a war like that ever again. The other one was that they felt like Germany was a good buffer from the Soviet Union. People felt like the Soviet Union was a lot more dangerous than Nazi Germany. Oh boy, were they wrong. Hitler took advantage of the disunity and this lack of commitment between the Allies. And in spring of 1938, he brought Austria into the Reich. And how he did that, Austria was actually they were almost at a vote. They were about to have a vote to see if they wanted to become a part of Nazi Germany. And literally the night that the votes were being taken, or the day of, Hitler basically just marches his army in and just takes it anyway. And I mean, he did have a strong Nazi sympathizing population there, but reality, he didn't want he didn't want the votes to have the chance to go the other way. So he took it anyway. His next step was to go after the Sudetenland, which is this dark purple area on your slides here, and that's around the country of Czechoslovakia. And Neville Chamberlain, the French premier, actually sit down with Hitler and they say, "Look, we will give you the Sudetenland if you'll stop trying to go after territory." The funny thing was Czechoslovakia was nowhere in this meeting, and they were not allowed to be in this meeting. So kind of funny how your land in your country is being auctioned off and you're not even a part of it. So Hitler agrees. Neville Chamberlain goes back to London, thinks he's a hero. They got this big piece of paper. It's like, I have a guaranteed peace in my time. In reality, he was mistaken because not a few months later, Hitler would then take over Czechoslovakia, set his sights on Poland, and the war would essentially start. So one thing I wanted to do, guys, actually this is our last slide, and I'll pick up on this. We're not worried about this right now. I'm just going to pick up on this on Wednesday. The assignments that I want you to do, these are going to be due on Friday. Your daily grade is I want you to kind of look at it and say, could Hitler have been stopped before his engagement in Poland? If you think so, when do you think the line should have been drawn? What would have been your solution? So if you were the prime minister of Great Britain or France, how would you have tried to stop Germany? If you don't think that there was any way to stop them, could there have been an alternative? So just kind of discuss with me on that, again, using your ideas. The next item on the agenda is a test grade that's due Friday. And I want you to tell me, when did Adolf Hitler lose his chance to win World War II? So we haven't necessarily gotten to the battles just yet, but we are going to. But I want you to kind of look at it and say, okay, when does Hitler officially lose? What was it? When was it? Was it a result of his arrogance, or was it misinformation by his officers? Was it one battle or the results of a couple battles? So that's for you to kind of dig in and look at. I'm telling you guys, there's thousands of sources that you can find, both for and against, pro, con, all that good stuff. The paper I want to be 3 pages type, double spaced. If you can cite me kind of where you're getting most of your information from, that's fine. What I will say is please do not copy and paste or plagiarize papers. Been there, done that, know how you guys will work with that, and I definitely have programs on these computers that I can literally just highlight, put that in, and it'll tell me exactly where you got the information word for word. So try not to plagiarize. Try to put your ideas as much as you can on there. But these are the 2 grades that you guys will have. So with that, guys, again, any questions, you can talk to me. You can email me at any time. You can talk to me on Tuesdays during office hours, and I'll have Zoom on Wednesdays. So with that, we're going to call it a day, and hope you guys are having a great week.